Okay. The 17th time is the charm, clearly. All right. Okay, so Hawaiian Islands, in the middle of the South Pacific, right? In the middle of the Pacific Ocean. Um, these are now when we think of Hawaii, this is what we think of, right? We think of these or so-called the main Hawaiian Islands. This is just exactly the same thing as the Channel Islands of our home. So we talk about the Channel Islands, but the term Channel Islands refers to all of the islands off of our part of California. But we usually just think of the big northern ones, right? We usually think of Santa Rosa, Anacapa, Santa Cruz, right? Um, and so it's analogous here. So in this case, the Hawaiian Islands are actually part of an archipelago, a necklace of islands that extends way off to the left here, that go way far out. Um, uh, uh, that include a whole array of small atolls where people do not, most of the islands do not support a resident population of humans. All of these islands that we have here, or almost all of them, support a fairly substantial human population. And so these are what we call the main Hawaiian Islands. And there's a new baby island just a little bit off the sort of lower right part of my screen that's just starting, hasn't broken the surface yet, but it eventually will break the surface. What has formed these Hawaiian Islands is this weak spot that we do not fully understand. But we have all these essentially layers of rock that are floating around our planet that we call tectonic plates. And for whatever reason, this particular part right now, that part is just in the lower right of your screen. There is a weakening or a thinning of the crust on the bottom of the seafloor. And that allows molten rock, magma, and all that good stuff to come close to the surface and actually pop through. And so the Hawaiian Islands have this sort of arc here going from what we call we call the island of Hawaii, or what everybody just calls the Big Island to distinguish it. And then we go up to Maui, Molokai, and Oahu, and we kind of have this arc. That's because the plate has been moving that away. And so wherever the plate is, this hot spot eventually pokes through, deposits liquid rock that eventually becomes solidified hard rock and builds up and builds up and builds up. So the youngest land in Hawaii, the newest rocks, are off to the right. And as we go up and to the left, we're getting older and older islands and therefore older and older rock formations. So the largest island in the chain is the island of Hawaii, and that has these two peaks on them, Mauna Loa and Mauna Kea, and they actually have year-round snow on them. So you can go skiing. You can ski one morning and then go down the hill and go surf, in the afternoon, kind of thing. This is also where on these peaks are also where we have some very important research facilities. So we have both astronomical facilities for studying space, as well as this is the famous location of the Keeling curves. Anybody know the Keeling curve or the Keeling? So that's when you see the classic data that shows how much carbon dioxide is in our atmosphere. This is the longest continuously measured atmospheric concentration of CO2 is from these mountain, the top of this mountain in Hawaii. And so that's been incredibly helpful in terms of us raising awareness of, understanding, monitoring climate change and greenhouse gases and stuff like that. Okay, so that's the Big Island of Hawaii. As we come up, the next island in the chain is the island of Maui, where we're going to be. I'm going to show you a close-up picture of Maui in a second, but that's Maui. And then we have Koholave, which is a little one to the bottom. Lanai is the next one off to the left, and Molokai. Those are usually all grouped operationally with Maui and government-wise with Maui. As we continue to go farther off to the left, we get to Oahu. This is where the capital of the state is. This is where the largest, military bases are. This is where the greatest economic activity is concentrated, et cetera. So Oahu is the most urbanized of the islands. Continuing on off to the left, we get to Kauai, which is also known as the Garden Isle. On that, very, very wet. So at the top of Kauai, it's the wettest place on Earth. So it gets more precipitation over a course of a year than anywhere else on average across the planet. So it's really, really wet. So when they film scenes for Jurassic Park and things like that, they film it in Kauai. Um, and then the last one on the main Hawaiian Islands, just off to the left, that's Ni'ihau. That is an island that I would love to go to one day. I've never made it there. But that is an island that is for native peoples. So that is an area where people practice traditional um, land use practices, speak Hawaiian, all that kind of great stuff. And there's no tourism person, no modern tourism, et cetera, on Niihau. So that's the main Hawaiian Islands sort of overview. Obviously, we're out in the middle of the Pacific. So even on the big island of Hawaii, the dominant ecology, the dominant forces are the ocean, right? The ocean is around us. That's what's affecting the rainfall. That's what's affecting the air temperature, all that kind of stuff. Um, and so Hawaii, it not only is different from the rest of our country in that it's so physically isolated and it's out in the middle of the Pacific, and it's physically far from continental land masses. Also, Hawaii is much more diverse than the average community or area on the mainland. And so when we think of Hawaii, we oftentimes think of native Hawaiians as a distinct ethnic group, and they are. But really, Hawaii for a long time has been this mixing pot, right? So there's many different cultures and ethnicities and different groups of people that have come together. And so major ethnic groups, in addition to the Polynesians, include the people from the Philippines and Japan are very, very common, and other parts of Southeast Asia, in addition to people from North America and Europe and other places like that. So not only are we sort of isolated, we really are this funky mixing area that began over 300 years ago, and has continued to progress as we go through. So we don't have time to go into all of this, but suffice it to say, Hawaii, all of these areas were originally distinct and managed separately. They were unified under King Kamehameha, and he really set the modern political framework up until American colonists and business interests essentially overthrew that monarchy. And so key figures here are Kamehameha, the guy off to the left that essentially unifies the islands. He is originally from Hawaii, from the big island of Hawaii, but once he solidifies power and all of that stuff, I know I'm skipping over a lot of history because we only have a couple minutes here. He relocates the political power, the political capital of the islands to Lahaina, to Maui. And so that's a bit more centrally located. It's a bit easier to get to all the other islands, and it's kind of more in the middle. And so since that time, Lahaina and Maui have been really important players in the political history, et cetera, of the island. This is Maui. This is the island of Maui. Gotta just hide this a little bit so I can see this. Okay, so to give us an orientation, here's Lahaina. This is where we're mostly going to be. You guys can see my cursor, right? You guys see my cursor? I can't see anything other than my screen.
Yeah, I had to zoom in.
Okay, cool. Okay. So, okay, cool. Maybe if I do I do this? Can I do this? Can I do a pointer? And if I do this? So is that better? that easy to see?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So anyway, so okay, so here's the island of Maui. So the main thing we have are these two mountain peaks. So we have this one, volcanic, uh, 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 historic volcano top over here, and this other one over here. Um, and between these two, accumulations, we have this relatively low, flat valley, and sort of plain, gradual, a relatively flat plain between these two peaks. We're gonna fly into the airport, which is over here in Kahului, and then we're gonna drive the first day, and then we're gonna pick you guys up in the vans, and then we're gonna drive this away, down around, and then this is Oluwalu is where we're camping, is where we're staying, and then we'll be doing stuff in and around Lahaina and Kanapale. Oh, I guess when I do the pointer, I can't use my things. Okay, so there's a little zoomed in. So this is mostly the chunk of Maui where we're going to be spending most of our time. So what you'll notice is we have the sort of steep mountain peaks, and then we have this fringing area. And just like in California and much of the rest of the world, this is where most of the people are going to be concentrated on and around the shore. So this is where all the hotels are. This is where the greatest urbanization is, et cetera. Not on the mountain peaks, right? It's hard to logistically hard to build there, et cetera. The brief history of what happened with this place is very wet. So this area here, this part of the island is relatively wet. This part over here is relatively dry. And so this wetness was what in just very verdant area is what drew Kamehameha and others to the town of Lahaina. And so initially, it was not only just a political center of power, but also a major area for other things, including food production. And so two of the staples there are taro, which is a aquatic plant, and the tuberous fibers are beaten and mashed up, and that becomes essentially a major starch that's consumed, which most people know that as poi, that's eaten with many meals. And then also breadfruit, which is grown on trees, also really important. And so initially, Lahaina was really, really great for producing those things. So a lot of ponds to grow taro, a lot of plantations, a lot of trees planted, both coconuts, which grow everywhere, but also breadfruit. As the imperial powers come in to Hawaii, oh, sorry, is there a question? Okay. So as the imperial powers come in, they see this as well. They see the massive amount of water, and they decide, we're gonna take this area over for growing commercial crops. So in this case, stuff to export. So not for Hawaiian peoples to feed themselves or to use themselves, but as an export economy, as a commodity market. And so that's what starts the modern history of Hawaii with sugar cane and pineapple plantations and that kind of stuff. So this whole area here gets converted to lots of areas around all the islands, but in particular this area into plantations. And again, looking at that great abundance of water, because things like sugar cane need a lot of water and fertilizer and other things, but water. And so that's where we are. Flash forward to World War II. In the wake of World War II, tourism becomes a major thing. And so then we get this development along all this rim, this west, so-called west side of Maui, of all kinds of tourist infrastructure, primarily hotels and resorts and things of that nature. And so what happened during the fire was essentially the same features or the same geography that makes this area really great for accumulating rainfall and be very wet and have these year-round rivers. Also was channeling winds, and so we had a storm that was not didn't directly hit Maui, but was nearby. But that storm induced really strong winds, and those strong winds essentially came down off of this hill, off the hilltop here, and blew. And with some down power lines, it seems to be. It's still there's still some investigation going on, but and it's the matter of uh, courtrooms are trying to decide what actually happened. But what seems to have happened is down power lines lead to fires. Fires get incredibly stoked, and we see the massive burning out of not just Lahaina but other communities as well during August of 2023. And so we'll go into much more detail on that later. But that's just a little bit of our geography of this area. So we will be working on various things, including our monitoring of whales. So these are some pictures of whales from our boat. And so the main thing there is to document mom and calves and to see mom's condition, how many babies she has, and to use pictures of these individuals, particularly their flukes or their tails that are unique to the individual, so we can fingerprint them. So by getting a good picture of a tail like this or a fluke, we can then put that in a database and figure out this is individual 3219 or whatever the heck, and be able to follow that individual through time. So we can look at reproductive success, all kinds of neat stuff. Other things that we will work on are trying to recover elements of the natural world. And so in this case, this is a partnership with academics, the community members, etc. And this is trying to work on recovering some of what was lost. So as I mentioned, as we had that historic plantation period that transitions into the modern period, we transform much of the landscape. So not only do we introduce non-native trees, a lot of the trees around here are that you're seeing are non-native plants. We also introduced a lot of what you see around the ground here, which are non-native grasses, just like we have in California, a lot of introduced Eurasian grasses, which are problematic. And so one of the things we're working on is trying to get to restore this ecosystem by restoring some of the key elements of this. And through a long arc of planting and managing weeds and planting natives, the idea is can we convert this area back to a native dominated landscape? We also, in the same area, we also have the Kapuka Oluwalu farm, which is trying to, in this case, not restore the native ecology, in this case, try to restore the native practices. One of the really cool things that you'll see, we'll talk about when we're there, is the traditional approach to managing landscapes. And in this case, the Hawaiian approach was based on watershed. So we can see here, here's the top of this mountain, and we have all these little pie wedges of landforms and other things going away from that peak. Whereas our modern day, we would go and draw a square and say that's Mia's area or Kim's area or whatever, right? Instead, the traditional approach was to create these pie wedges of land, and it was based on how productive it was. So if it had a lot of water, some great growing places, maybe you only needed a little bit. If it didn't have a whole lot of water or whatever, you maybe got a larger area because you needed more area to grow food. And so this fantastic nonprofit is both trying to recover some of the traditional Hawaiian practices, but also the traditional Hawaiian approach to food production. And so that's what we're seeing here. So this is last year's students standing around one of these ponds that it's filled with taro, and there's different varieties of taro that different colors, different tastes, etc. And so we'll be helping out on the farm with helping support the production of more of the traditional foods of the Hawaiian people. We're working with other groups when we're there. I know we're almost out of time here, but just real quickly, different groups in terms of doing food distribution, other things. Hawaiian Native Council is but one of those. We'll also be doing our microplastics work, which is going to be, we'll be collecting samples for our own monitoring. Two, we'll be working with different school groups so that those students can be understanding what's going on. And we're working on still launching a long-term project with our partners in Hawaii that you guys will hopefully be helping us with, to establish long-term monitoring of microplastics. A lot of the stuff that we'll show them is totally doable by them and no problem. But the last step involves fingerprinting the type of plastic that it is and confirming that it really is plastic and not a piece of cotton. For that, we need this really expensive machine we have in our lab called a microscope-based FTIR. And so for that last step, we need a big kind of fancy university research lab, but the other elements will be out there. One other thing that we'll be helping Dr. Cartwright with is also doing water quality measurements. So for those folks that are on the boat for those days, you guys will be dropping a water quality probe into the water, and we'll be measuring turbidity and water quality and things of that nature that we're trying to correlate with our whale observations. So yeah, so we're just about out of time, and I want to leave some time for questions, but that's it. So that's a little bit of an introduction. I'm going to give you guys much more detail with some links after our meeting here tonight. But I just want to say how stoked I am for this, how stoked I am that you guys are joining us, and also just remind you that the key thing that we need from you guys is just positive attitude, right? You might be tired from a day of traveling or working all day long. This is a fantastic experience. We're here to help our brothers and sisters in Hawaii. That's the main reason we're here. As an added benefit, you guys are going to have a wonderful experience. You guys are going to learn a lot about this fantastic culture, all this great stuff. But first and foremost, we're there to help. And so that's the mindset that I know you'll bring, that we'll be bringing. And it's going to be absolutely fantastic. I can't wait to see everybody there. And so